So what I'm talking about here isn't necessarily either of these two rivers. It's more just this idea of there being a fork in the road. Hello. This video is going to be a little different. Most of the time my videos are about one topic. This is going to be kind of all over the place. But I'm going to talk about thinning veils, occult symbolism, and subhuman divergence, which is going to be kind of a Gnostic rant or ramble. So I want to cover some poll results, and then like I said, I'm going to go on this rant for a while. So without further ado, let's get started. Thinning of the veil poll results. So around Halloween time, I did this poll. If you could lift one veil on Halloween night, what would you choose? Here are the results of the poll. There was a tie. I'm going to start with the veil between the worlds, which was at 35%. And I think this is the oldest hunger in the world. People have always wanted confirmation of other worlds, proof that the invisible is real. Some might say it's a dangerous curiosity, a Lovecraftian tale, be careful what you wish for. Here are my thoughts on this. Wanting this veil lifted isn't really about wisdom. I mean, what would you do if this actually happened? I suspect many people would go mad. If this happened on a large scale, there would be mass hysteria. I think that a very small minority would be able to handle this revelation. Probably those who have had some kind of dealings with the supernatural before. But really, the majority would lose their minds. Like I said, be careful what you wish for. The veil of illusion, also at 35%. The results for this are equal to the veil between worlds, and I think that's telling. This is the impulse to see through the false reality, the world of the demiurge. Spiritually, it's awakening or gnosis. It's recognizing the prison. The danger here is arrogance, I think. Once the illusion drops, many assume they've escaped it entirely. They haven't. I mean, think back on certain times of your life when an illusion has dissolved. When you were a child, the illusion of being an adult was kind of a great idea. Then, you become an adult and it's not a great idea. When you came of age, the illusion of having sex would finally quell the urges in your body. Did they? Maybe later in life, the illusion that love would save you, that also probably disintegrated. The illusion that knowledge would make you immune to pain. The problem with any illusion is you don't know how deep it goes, how deep the maze is. Every time an illusion falls, another one quietly takes its place. More subtle, more convincing, and maybe harder to name. So the trap isn't illusion itself, it's more believing you're done with it, ever. The veil of ignorance, 20%. I think this is the most genuinely Gnostic answer, and the fact that it's low says a lot. To lift ignorance is to risk discovering that your suffering is partially self-maintained. Most people don't actually want knowledge. They want reassurance. And I think this is different than seeing through illusions. Well, how? Illusion is external. Stories, symbols, systems, narratives that you're inside. Ignorance is internal. What you refuse to know about yourself, your motives, or your complicity. Seeing through illusion lets you point outward. They lied, or the world is false, or the system is rigged. Gnosis doesn't just reveal that reality is distorted. It reveals how eagerly some have adapted to the distortion. Illusion says you were deceived. Ignorance says that you've agreed. And the last one is the veil of self, which was 10%. I think this is the rarest choice because it's the most terrifying. Coming from an ego-driven point of view, nobody wants this. To lift this veil is ego death. It's annihilation into the divine, the collapse of the false I. The other three choices have the I point of view, and I actually think this is the most extreme veil and definitely the most terrifying. If you have any thoughts about these, you can comment below. I would probably pick the veil of self, followed closely by the veil of ignorance, but let's move on to the other poll. Gnostic worldview symbolism. So I introduced this poll like this. Doing some research on occult symbolism, setting aside the Gnostic cross, which occult symbol do you think best represents the Gnostic worldview? If you don't know the Gnostic cross, it looks like this. It represents intersection and imprisonment, spirit trapped in matter. The vertical represents the divine spark descending. The horizontal is the material world, time, suffering. Now keep in mind, I could probably do a whole video on each of these symbols, and maybe I will at some point. But for this, I'm going to keep it simple. Here are the results. As you can see, the Ouroboros is the clear winner. It represents eternity eating itself. The serpent devouring its own tail symbolizes closed systems, recurrence, and self-sustaining loops. In alchemy, it means wholeness. In Gnostic thought, it's often the prison of repetition, birth, death, rebirth, with no exit unless the cycle is broken consciously. The next up is the tree of life at 23%. The tree maps how the infinite Ein Sof fractures itself into structured reality through emanations called the Sephiroth. It explains how divinity becomes diluted into matter. From a Gnostic lens, it's a blueprint for descent. Power flows downward, fragmentation increases, illusion thickens. After that, we have the black sun, the occulted dark light, which was 17%. This is hidden illumination, not evil. The black sun represents inverted light. It's awareness gained through negation, isolation, and confrontation with the void. Not life affirming, but truth revealing, often tied to Saturn, death, and initiation through loss. And the final one is the Rose Cross of the Rosicrucians. This is pain made conscious. The cross represents ordeal. The rose is consciousness blooming within it. This symbol means awakening doesn't bypass suffering, it metabolizes it. Unlike Christian salvation, the Rose Cross insists transformation comes through endurance, integration, and transmutation, not forgiveness. So why I put this all together is I think all of these symbols are different aspects of the Gnostic prison. From my own point of view, this is the order that I've placed them in. The Gnostic cross defines the Gnostic struggle best, I think. The Rose Cross is quite similar to the Gnostic cross in meaning, actually, so I put that next. The black sun, truth is occulted, inverted, and dangerous. Gnosis is hidden. The Ouroboros is endless cycles. This seems the most obvious, but it really just defines cycles, I think. And the Kabbalistic tree of life maps out the emanations, but doesn't really tell us much else unless you go deeply into the Kabbalah. I think if one looks at this poll as merely defining the soul trap, then I think the results are telling. The Ouroboros fits. But I tend to look at this through a religious lens, maybe. In my mind, the struggling and redemption is more important than the cycle. Anyway, if you have any insights on this, you can comment that below. But let's get to the last topic. A quick heads up before we continue. For the new year, I'm doing a giveaway. The prize is a $25 Amazon gift card, as well as a 60-minute Zoom call with me. We can talk about Gnosticism, the occult, writing, publishing, whatever you want to talk about, whatever's on your mind. In return, I'm re-releasing a book and I could use some help. If this piques your curiosity, the full details are in the description. Now let's get back to the video. Subhuman Divergence. So since I've been back stateside, I've noticed more and more this idea of what I'm going to call subhuman divergence. I'm sure you've probably seen at least one version of the time machine on TV or as a film, or maybe you've even read the novella. I'm not going to go into Wells as a person. I will say this, as a child, I really looked up to him. Later in life though, I think maybe he was more controlled opposition. Anyway, if you haven't read the novella, it's quite good. I'm gonna give some minor spoilers so I can talk about this, but in the novella, there are two diverging tributaries of humanity in the future. There is the Eloi. They are surface-dwelling, childlike, passive, aesthetic, beautiful, weak, incurious. They represent the degeneration of the leisure class, humans who inherited comfort and lost intelligence, agency, and will. Then you have the Morlocks, who are the subterranean, industrial, nocturnal, kind of predatory. They were brutal but competent. They represent the descendants of the working class. They were forced underground, maintaining the machines, and eventually feeding on the alloy. So what I'm talking about here isn't necessarily either of these two rivers. It's more just this idea of there being a fork in the road. In my youth, there were punks, and there is always kind of a counterculture. That's not what I'm talking about here. In fact, I think what I'm talking about here is the antithesis of that. From my point of view, the punks were more about agency and resistance, opting out, raging against the machine, quite rebellious. In the world today, though, I think this is happening. I'm going to call them subhumans. I don't mean this in any racial context, so don't go there. These subhumans can be of any race, in my opinion. Philosophically, I think they're a lot more like the Morlocks. Maybe the film Idiocracy portrays them well, but since I've been back, I have noticed a distinct split between what I would consider the healthy people and the compromised. You can especially see this in pop culture with ads. Advertising anything that's beautiful is immediately attacked. I've noticed this at a lot of corporate businesses that I have gone to for one reason or another. The workers at these places, dead eyes, stringy hair, either overweight or anorexic thin, gray skin from poor diet, which is, probably energy drinks and overly processed food, sexual confusion. Now, don't get me wrong, there have always been unkept people. That's not what I'm talking about. This isn't poverty, rebellion, or eccentricity. I think this is degeneration without any kind of resistance. No alternative culture, no counter signal, just compliance. You can actually see it a lot if you go on social media, how people just parrot what think tanks are telling them to say. It's almost a kind of sedation. If we don't change things, I think there's going to be a collapse. It's coming. I think one group still orients around health, coherence, fertility, clarity, and long-term thinking. The other group doesn't act, they're acted upon. Their bodies and minds are kind of malfunctioning. Their circadian rhythms are wrecked. Chemical diets, endocrine fallout, disassociated sexuality, eyes that never quite focus. I'm not saying they're evil per se, but I think they've adapted to poison. Spiritual poison, nutritional poison, mental poison. And the system prefers them this way. In fact, it encourages it. Beauty, vitality, sexual clarity, ambition, these create friction. They generate desire, competition, hierarchy, reproduction, and meaning. So what I would call the intact people are quietly attacked, mocked, etc. If you want to be snaky about a takeover, you don't eliminate the healthy. You redefine health as suspicious. Meanwhile, the compromised are normalized, often celebrated, and endlessly accommodated. I'm not making a moral judgment here. It's more about a diagnosis. I don't think Wells wrote a warning about the distant future. I think he wrote a model. I think the story is often misinterpreted where people think the split happens after a collapse. It doesn't. It happens now, quietly. Well, everyone insists there's nothing unusual going on. Since I was gone for a long time, I have a unique entry point into this, I think, because I have stepped out of this process and re-entered it a little ways down the line. I think it's been happening for about 20 years, or probably longer if we're being honest with ourselves. It's kind of like the boiling frog analogy. If you throw the frog in there when it's boiling, it will try to jump out, right? But if you turn it up slowly, it will just cook. But it's something I've noticed, and it didn't really fit in its own video, so I just thought I'd throw it here. Anyway, if you have any thoughts about this, I'd love to hear about them. You can post them below, but my advice here is just to be aware of it, because if you're not one of those, eventually you're gonna be the enemy. That's all I got. Take care. Have a good day.